afternoon. Welcome to Bookline Interactive's group show, The Safety Net, dedicated to issues of domestic violence. And during COVID, we've expanded what we chat about. I'm Susan Howard, a local attorney with 30 years of experience in the area of domestic violence, but I want to get right to it today. We have a most special guest, Bernard Greene, chair of the Bookline Board of Selectmen. He is a graduate of Swarthmore College and Boston College Law School. And I have to say, as a citizen of Brookline, probably the most prolific Board of Selectmen chair we have ever had. I don't think Bernard sleeps. I think he text walks, email walks. I don't know what he does, but he is just everywhere. And his commitment to the community is pure and absolutely immeasurable. We are so grateful. Bernard, thank you for taking the time to do this. And I'd like to ask you some questions if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
You don't mind?
Don't
Do you have
mind.
any experience in working to end domestic violence?
Well, mainly when I lived in Tennessee, I was the Attorney General's designee to the Domestic Violence State Coordinating Council, which was a statewide organization established by the legislature to train law enforcement, give some direction to the courts, and put together various regulations to govern things like batterers intervention programs. So in that capacity, I worked with advocates around the state and nationally, actually, through the National Association of Attorneys General, to come up with training and guidance books. We put together a domestic abuse bench book to be used by all the courts in Tennessee. We had the support of the Supreme Court's Chief Justice at the time, which was very important. And we were able to really get that bench book and the information out to all of the 99 counties of Tennessee, some of which weren't as progressive and forward-thinking as Davidson County, which is where Nashville was. I also worked on one of the regulations called the Batterers Intervention Program regulations, which was very difficult to do because batterers intervention programs aren't always the great things that people think they are. We had to make sure that in writing the regulations, we didn't give batterers, for example, an opportunity to avoid taking responsibility for their actions by saying, well, I went to a batterers intervention program and I'm clean now. When in fact, many of the programs really don't do much more than give someone an opportunity to say they talked. And also it could be used by some people as a way of saying that domestic violence is not as important as other violence because we have a batterers program to fix it. When in fact, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
So that was my main experience working with domestic violence on a actually statewide and national scale, and I learned a lot, and I think we accomplished a lot for Tennessee.
It sounds it. Wow, that was a while ago. I'm not trying to date you, Bernard.
Yeah, no, I am old.
No, before domestic violence was put on the map. Why do you think domestic violence is important for Bookline to address? Or do you?
Oh, it's absolutely important. It's important for any community in the United States, and I'm sure I know it's a problem worldwide, but it's a problem for Brookline because domestic violence affects people of any age, any race, any income level. It's a problem with all kinds of intimate relations, dating relations, family relations, caregiver relations, and it's endemic to our culture. One of the phrases that's used in the domestic violence world is that domestic violence is really a question of power and control.
Mhm.
power and control over people. In this case, typically power and control by a husband over his wife. But if you think about it, I mean, that's sort of part of our culture. I mean, the last 4 years under the president, whose name we won't state, power and control was sort of the way that he operated, and that had an effect, I think, on the country. I mean, domestic violence predated him by generations, but that made it worse, and the politics at a national level or local level really helps define how people relate to each other in all situations, such as a family. And of course, domestic violence is a problem here in Brookline. It's a problem, like I said, of all ages. We have issues in the high school and in middle school with dating relationships. We have issues in caregiving situations.
Right.
And we have issues among seniors, unfortunately, among people in the Tony sections of South Brookline, as well as North Brookline, among lower income families. This is not something that can be attributed to one category of people. It's something that, like I said, is endemic to our society, to our culture, and it makes it very difficult to eradicate it because yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish.
Oh no, it just makes it difficult to eradicate because it's almost normal in some people's minds. Now, not everyone. I mean, most people, do not have that power and control mentality, but it is a widespread problem.
And especially during COVID, Bernard, we've seen a spike. There are 53 deaths every month in the United States as a result of domestic violence. 1 in 3 women will experience some sort of domestic violence in their lifetime. But even though there's been a spike worldwide, as you stated, in Brookline, other issues have taken center stage. So we're not talking about domestic violence. Judges aren't interested in domestic violence anymore. It's been my experience that let's move the cases, let's move the docket. And there isn't the concern that we once had. What do you think we can do about this?
Well, we need to talk about it. Make sure that it's not slipping from the agenda of many things. And I think we need to view domestic violence as a social justice issue. I mean, abuse of women is sort of the original sin of mankind, at least in patriarchal societies. There are matriarchal societies, and I don't know much about them, but in patriarchal societies, abuse of women is, or control of women, and maybe in earlier times there was so-called reasons for it, because of the scrapping around for food and things like that. But today there's no excuse. But it's something that we have to look at, in my opinion, as a social justice issue. I mean, women are more than 50% of the population, and when 50% of the population are put in that type of risk situation, it becomes an issue of our entire society that has to be dealt with. I mean, it's not just women who are affected by this; it's men too. And if you think about it in terms of women who are victims of domestic violence with kids, with male kids, you are training that male child to become another abuser when he grows up. And in Tennessee, we among the things we did was to just talk to victims and talk to police about their experiences, and some of the experiences involving how young boys were trained to become abusers by an abusing father. They're just heartbreaking. And it's really, really something. And I think we need to be, consistent in our message. For example,
important. That's really important.
Yeah. I mean, one example is, we can't talk about being opposed to domestic violence and wanting to protect women if we're talking about defunding the police. They're the ones who put their lives on the line, to deal with domestic violence cases, And, it's a resource in the fight against domestic violence that we can't degrade. And, unfortunately, there is there is a tendency to degrade that resource by talk of defunding the police and other things. As you know, my policing reform committee is trying to fight against that, but it's relevant in the domestic violence context as it is in many other contexts.
And also, it took us about 30 years to get domestic violence designated as a crime. And I don't think people realize that. Many years ago, it was just, oh, go home and sleep it off, or just separate. And nothing criminal, nothing happened in the courts with domestic violence. They just wanted to push it away. So I think what you're saying, I think the police, particularly in Brookline, take domestic violence very, very, very seriously. The farther you go from a metropolitan area, I have to say, in Massachusetts, you go to the western part of the state and there isn't the seriousness about domestic violence as we have here. So in addition to police resources, what other resources do we have in Brookline to address domestic violence?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to emphasize what you just said, and that is we have a lot of institutional impediments to attacking domestic violence. As you go out into rural areas, the isolation tends to be a big factor there. In many parts of the country, including Massachusetts, religious ideas or religious practices are an impediment. The view of the role of women in a marriage, is an impediment. It's not just a problem among religious institutions, but that's part of our culture. This is it makes it very difficult. What resources do we have in Brookline?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
To address domestic violence. Well, unfortunately, the Brookline Police Department is the frontline resource that we need in order to provide the initial response to a domestic violence incident. We can't, they are the only ones who can do it, who should do it. Domestic violence incidents are very volatile. To send a social worker to one of these things, as has been suggested, even here in Brookline, would be totally disastrous. The first resource we have is the Brookline Police Department. Fortunately, they are very attuned to the need to address aggressively domestic violence and have a number of resources in the police department to do that. But, I think the first thing you need to tell people is, a DV, a domestic violence incident, requires a call to 911. As I said, they're the frontline resource, not to a counselor or a social worker, but to 911, because it's a dangerous situation. Even if it just starts out with a few slaps, the mentality of power and control, escalates very quickly. Of course, social workers are important in the domestic violence context once a situation is stabilized, mainly to provide, help and it's usually women. Men can be victims of domestic violence also, but, typically, it's a woman. And after the incident has been stabilized, then a social worker or a counselor has a very important role, and that is to help develop basically a safety plan, some place to go, where they're safe, where they have resources to take care of the kids. For example, in many Jewish families, you're also looking for a place where there's kosher food to eat, because although the real concern is the safety of the person, you can't just ignore those cultural things that make their lives easier. Other communities have similar concerns. So, social worker counselors, can help develop a long-term safety plan, long-term place to live. et cetera. But, in Brookline, we have a number of programs that, people can reach out to. This program, the Safety Net on YouTube, that you operate, Susan, is, an important resource in terms of just information for people. And,
Right.
it really starts with information. The police department, has a victim witness coordinator, Doreen Gallagher, who people can reach out to. There's a domestic violence roundtable, which works here in Brookline to gather relevant people together and talk about problem solving, as well as other issues that are coming up in the context of domestic violence. We have in the Jewish community a Journey to Safety group, Jewish Family and Children's Services is a domestic violence resource there that's very important. Jennifer Lynch Committee Against Domestic Violence, which is founded by a woman whose daughter was killed in a domestic violence incident. They, I believe, are still active in the high school to educate students on teen dating issues.
Yes.
And, they actually fund the hotel costs many times when a woman or a victim has to get out of the house and into some safe location after an incident. And then, we don't have a safe house in Brookline, but
Right.
there is a safe house in Newton that we cooperate with. And as I said, hotels are sort of initial safe house, for victims of domestic
For
violence.
days when the incident happens, it takes 7 tries to leave an abusive situation,
Right.
which to me is just fraught with danger. And one of the things, when you're talking about a safe house, there's a huge problem. Shelters. There aren't enough places for survivors or victims of domestic violence to go. And I don't know what we can do about that. There just aren't. And one of the things that there's a transition now from saying domestic violence to family violence, because as you mentioned, everybody in the family is affected. Kids, all of a sudden their life dissolves. They can't go to soccer anymore. They can't go to baseball. They don't understand why the family is split. So, I mean, the problems are really, particularly during COVID, Bernard.
Yeah.
COVID, I think, has just exacerbated the isolation and the inability to reach out to resources. Do you think political leaders take domestic violence seriously enough?
Some do, some don't. Everyone gives it lip service, but we need more than lip service. I mentioned earlier the defund the police thing. That was when political leaders in town meeting pushed a foolish warrant article to defund the police, to actually 2 warrant articles to defund the police, and which doesn't really help because of the critical role police play in responding to domestic violence incidents, which are very, like I said, very, very volatile. I mean, it could start off being, a calm, discussion between, husband and wife, and suddenly, it's something else. And of course, you have kids there, and that requires specialized assistance to protect the kids, as well as to, get information as to what's really going on. At a national level, President Biden in the White House is very important. We have a champion at the highest level because Biden, as you probably know, was the original and longtime champion of the Violence Against Women Act.
Right.
And for my work in Tennessee, I know how important that was. That funded a lot of programs that we used, as well as conferences at the national level to bring together advocates and policymakers to work on best practices and learn the latest information in the field. So that's the Violence Against Women Act has been going through a lot of ups and downs over the years, but I think we now have a champion in the White House that will really make sure that it is reinvigorated. He's also done a lot of other things that put the issues facing women on the front burner. And I say that because domestic violence is just one aspect of a big problem we have in this society. We have a lot of problems, right? We have racism, we have general sexism, we have misogyny, which sort of blends into violence against women. We have anti-immigrant attitudes. I mean, anyone who's not in the preferred group is a victim. And
Right.
When the victimizers have some hegemonic position in society, I mean, it's really, really dangerous. But I think, like I said, in Brookline, I think people at least give lip service. We got to really raise the issue, higher to provide support for domestic violence programs, and as well as I think I already said, this has to be an issue that we message about, that we talk about, that we talk about as a social justice issue.
Yes.
As we talk about in terms of how it affects particular communities. I'm thinking of immigrant communities, communities of sort of unique cultures, where it's easy to hide abuse. So I think we have to push leaders to take it more seriously, and to be very clear and consistent in their messaging. So,
Bruno, what additional things can the select board do to help in the struggle against domestic violence? I mean, I have some suggestions, but
okay.
they're all green. We need money.
Yeah, no, we need money, and the American Rescue Plan that Biden was able to get through Congress, is going to help. But I think we need to begin to think about how in our current structure of government, for example, we have a Department of Public Health and Human Services. I've suggested some enhancements to that department to deal with some mental illness and substance abuse issues that police have to deal with. I proposed increasing the availability of social workers as well as other social service providers to take some of the burden off of police. Not to say that police don't have a role, but that in terms of follow-up action after a crisis incident, we need more social work type resources to create just like in domestic violence, create a plan for someone who's having a crisis, mental health crisis, create a plan to get them into treatment, into a safe and stable living environment, to deal with all the issues that mental health or substance abuse creates in terms of their family, et cetera. So I think that we should, and this program has sort of prompted me to think about what type of additional resources we need in the domestic violence sphere that the select board can advocate for. I mean, one thing that I was talking to Rita McNally the other day, and she mentioned that domestic violence roundtable does a lot, but it really doesn't have the type of staff support it would need to do more in terms of getting out information, and other things. So, that's something that I think can be solved fairly easily. Doesn't even have to require additional hiring, although, but rather tagging along with hiring that we may be making in Health and Human Services Department or the Diversity Office,
Right.
to provide the roundtable with some additional staff support, just to do the day-to-day details of meeting and getting out information and all the other things you have to do as a public body under the open meeting law and public records law and all that. So that's another thing.
Reed is a real champion, and basically she's been doing the roundtable all by herself.
Yeah.
And I know she feels really sort of stymied because she has so many wonderful ideas and she just needs an assistant to sort of do the computer little things and to set up the meetings. That's really all it is.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, if I can just interject, is how can we get the community more involved in the roundtable? more involved in what the select board is, what you're suggesting. How can we do that? I don't know how to do that because people are seem to be overwhelmed right now. I mean, I understand COVID, getting your shots, adjusting to maybe re-entering the world at some level. They're really not, they don't seem interested in these issues. I don't know, maybe it's me, Bernard.
Well, I mean, you don't expect, people in the community to do, all the hard work. That's for, us political leaders and staff in town, et cetera. But what we can, urge among the population is just an understanding of the issue and support of efforts to deal with it. It's the political leaders, the staff, and others who have to get out and do the dirty work. But we need the support of the community, and that's what we need to sort of organize. Support of the community for the initiatives they're taking, and to help us make sure that domestic violence is on everyone's front burner as a social justice issue. And as an issue that we really have to deal with, both men and women, because men are hurt by domestic violence just as women are. I mean, not as much, but they are hurt, and we have to recognize that. I mean, it's the children of an abuser,
Yep.
who are hurt, but it's also the men in the community who sometimes have to carry the burden of the bad behavior of some men being attributed to all of us. I mean, that's sort of a typical problem in I guess any society. As a Black man, I cringe whenever I see a criminal act being done. I hope it's not a Black person. That's something that is an example of how domestic violence impacts more than just the immediate victims. I think it impacts men and everyone else, because when a woman is suffering from domestic violence, her ability to function in a productive capacity in society is diminished, if not eliminated. And that hurts us all. Women do incredibly important things in society, in addition to taking care of their own kids. Many times, for historical reasons, many teachers tend to be women. Nurses, probably the most important people in hospitals, tend to be women. Many support staffs in organizations tend to be women, for historical reasons. I mean, it's changing fortunately now, but history has not gone away, and it's still the case. And when those people are hiding from an abusive spouse, or tending to their injuries from an attack, their ability to serve the purposes or serve their society in the jobs that they do, as well as the general support they give to their kids and to their friends and neighbors, et cetera, is diminished, and that hurts us all. So this is not just something that is a problem for the woman and her kids. I mean, this is a problem for every one of us, and we have to look at it that way.
And I want to follow up on something that, and I don't mean this to be a curveball, when you say a social justice issue, I think you're absolutely right, but maybe the help we're seeking could be redefined in terms of social justice measures. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but I think that's very, very intriguing what you just said. I've never heard that before about domestic violence. So could you just explain that a little bit?
Well, when we say social justice, it means a lot of things, but one of the things it means is addressing the things in society that make it difficult for everyone to participate in society. The unfairness, the racism, the sexism that is sort of ingrained in our society that we have to fight against, and the fight against that stuff is social justice fight, and domestic violence is part of that fight, and I think it should be labeled as such. That's not an academic explanation or
No, but it's
what I mean,
clear.
but yeah, I'm not an academic, so That's how I put it.
I agree. It should be labeled that way. And I think that we need to promulgate that it is a social justice issue and it might draw more people in. In the little time we have left, is there anything else you'd like to say about domestic violence at all?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to say, a lot to say. I guess, I really have a responsibility to say a couple things. And that is, if you or anyone in your audience, I'm sorry, if anyone in the audience is being hurt by domestic violence, get help. Don't just ignore it and hope it goes away or hope you can make up or hope that he will change. That won't happen. You need to get help. There are plenty of resources out there to help you. If you're in danger, call 911. Do not hesitate. Let me just say, I mean, we always talk about how women always go back to their abuser after a while, and we blame women for that. We say they're not really serious about their abuse, et cetera, et cetera. But women, victims of abuse, men or women, know that there's only so much that the police and society can do to protect them. If their abuser wants to kill them, he can do that. In this society, it's easy. So that's a cause for the hesitancy sometimes. Also, many women don't have their own resources in order to live outside of a marriage, and that impacts their willingness to get out. But if they're in danger, danger is not going to just end with a little slapping around. I mean, it could end in something much more serious. So 911 is the first resource that you should take advantage of. And I think I mentioned earlier the importance of putting together a plan for long-term safety. Even if you're still stuck in the relationship, you need to begin to think, how do I get out? What are my options? When is there going to be a chance that I can escape? And what do I do? Where do I go? Where do I get the resources I need to survive? It's not easy. No one's suggesting it's easy, but I think victims need to think about that. And there are resources that can help them. Think about a plan of action to get into a safe situation. I mean, Doreen Gallagher, our victim and witness advocate at Brookline Police Department, is one resource. And if I can, I'd like to just give her a number, because she's probably maybe the first resource someone should reach out to. That's 617-730-2713. There are a lot of other resources. There's a national domestic violence hotline that provides assistance on safety planning, which is what we're talking about here, 24/7. And it, has the resources that can translate, as well as provide services to people who have hearing difficulties. In Massachusetts, I guess our 24/7 statewide hotline is called Safe Link.
Yes.
It's a toll-free domestic violence hotline and resource for anyone afflicted by domestic violence or dating violence. And let's not forget, dating violence is a huge issue. And I might as well just give that number. It's 877-785-2020. And it also has resources for deaf or hard of hearing people and translation services. And of course, the Norfolk County DA is a big advocate for the domestic violence community, or the community of abused women and others. And I also want to add, I used to work at the Massachusetts Attorney General's office also, and you'd be surprised at how many resources they have. So if you have been a victim of a violent crime, and domestic violence is one of those crimes, you can apply for victim compensation. There's a statewide program, I think managed by the Attorney General's office, that can provide financial assistance for uninsured medical and dental care, mental health counseling, funeral and burial costs, and income loss. I mean, a whole host of resources that is managed through the Attorney General's office that will help someone who is a victim and has injuries that are costly and or difficult for them to handle. So don't forget that also, because it's not just stopping the crime from happening, but it's also restoring the victim to the extent possible to a normal, safe life. So that's the other thing I'd like to, I would mention in this context.
Bernard Greene, terrific. Thank you so much. You've had quite an experience in the world of domestic violence, and it's continuing. COVID has certainly exacerbated our resources and has made it really, really difficult for those involved in situations. I don't know what's going to happen as we transition, hopefully, out of the COVID era into what Governor Baker calls the new normal. I'm not so sure about the new. I just hope there's some semblance of normal. Bernard Greene, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today.
Well, thank you, Susan, for having me, and thank you for the work you do in domestic violence with this program and other things. Okay.